So let's try Podman now. We're going to move on from Builda into Podman, which is the next section here. So now I want to run this container and I want to expose port 3000, just like I was doing like docker run node web service, right? So here, you'll notice that Podman is also installed on this particular container, but if you need to install it, I left you instructions on how to do that as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say Podman run. This one, you have to give it a C group manager, right, for the control groups, because it doesn't necessarily have one by default, whereas Docker does. So I'm going to say C group manager, C group fs, and I'm going to tell it -p 3000:3000, which is going to expose that port for us. And then I'm going to do localhost. I'm going to tell it to look on localhost for my app Builda. Otherwise, it's going to go, if I don't tell it the localhost part, it's going to go out and try and find on like Docker Hub or something like that. Okay, and then this will have Podman execute this container for us. And there you go. You can see that this is now running. If I click here, open link, and there you go. This is running our node service inside of that Builda container, which I exposed that port, and then Podman is actually the one executing that container within the Docker container. I recognize that there's like a lot of levels to this, right? Which is kind of the nature of the beast, sorry. I'm not telling you that Builda and Podman are any better than Docker. I'm not telling you that Docker is any better than Builda and Podman. There are various different use cases where one might be better for you. And keep in mind that there's more than just Builda and Podman and Docker. There's also things like Rocket, right? Rocket's another one that does similar things, and it's from CoreOS, and it works really well. Like there's a bunch of different engines for containers. If you're just getting started out, which I'm guessing you are if you're watching this course, I'd recommend sticking to Docker. The nice thing about Docker is it's been around for so long and there's so many people using it that you can Google for anything and it's going to be on the internet. Like someone else is going to have your problem and it's going to be able to be fixed, right? Whereas Builda and Podman, one, they're still quite new, so they're still changing a lot, and there's just not as much documentation out there for it. So keep that in mind when you're choosing. So something else that's pretty cool, that I think is pretty cool, you can actually use Builda. So that, just pretend for a second that I was on a Linux computer, or I was here in WSL or something like that. I can actually have Builda push into my Docker registry, my local one, and then I can use Docker to execute the Builda container, which is really cool too. So again, those things work really well together side by side. So I actually left the command in there if you're working with Linux. And I'll show you here. Down here in Podman. So if you ran this and you had Docker on the same level, right, this wouldn't work in my Mac OS one right now because it's within a container, so it actually can't see Docker. If I say Builda push localhost my app Builda Docker daemon my app Builda latest, this would actually push it into my Docker container. I think what you need to do is you need to expose the Docker daemon inside of the container. So I'm going to exit out of this. We got to make this even more complicated. We're going to say -var/var/run/docker.sock:/var/run/docker.sock. Okay, now I should be able to come here and say back here in Builda, because I killed all the registry that it had, so I have to rebuild the Builda container. So I'm going to say Builda bud -f /dockerfile . Where am I? Oh, I have to be inside a source. Okay, Builda bud -f./dockerfile -t my app builda dot. Okay, that'll build my Docker container. And now actually I realized that I gave it a volume, so it actually did keep this between runs. But nonetheless, okay, that should all work. That's all stored. And then here, it should work if I say build a push, right? Because you can push it out to a registry. Localhost / myapp - builda. So I'm pushing that container, and I'm going to push it to the Docker daemon : my app builda : latest. So now, because I opened that connection, that bind mount between my Docker host and into the container, now builda can actually push out of the container into the my local Docker registry of Docker desktop running, and then I'm going to be able to execute this builda container inside of the host with Docker. So what you see here, this is actually it copying the container out of the container and into Docker. So it's not actually, this isn't going to the network, right? This is just staying within my container. So now I should be able to say Docker run, and then notice this is just inside of my Mac, right? I'm not inside of the container now. -it my app builda bash, and here you go. I am now inside of the container running Docker that I built with builda. And same thing here, if I say my app builda, and I say -p 3000 : 3000, this should execute my node. Oh, something's already bound on that, so let's just say 3001. So now if I come over here and say localhost 3001, now I'm actually running the node server that I built with the builda toolchain, but I'm using Docker to do it. So this is kind of proving my point that builda does not build Docker containers, it builds OCI containers, right? But they both work interchangeably. And I could build a Docker container, and I could use Podman to execute that as well. So that's pretty cool. I did not expect that to work. I'm going to re-emphasize the point of someone might ask, like, why would I use builda and Podman over Docker right now? And I think the real strongest reason is to not use Docker. And some people might have strong opinions of like why they would not want to use Docker. I don't necessarily know what they are, but it does encourage healthy competition to use some of these competitors and not be locked into one ecosystem. So, not that I think Docker are bad people. I think actually they're doing really great things and they're good members of the community. So.